Welcome to the Vaxa Intelligence Optimised podcast. I'm joined again by my good friend, the Honourable Bernie Ripoll. Bernie, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Todd. Great to be with you on this channel.
Thank you, mate. Really enjoyed our last chat. Thank you. I promised that we'd come back and talk about how bioenergy is affecting national and regional security. It's particularly given that it's the sources of food, agriculture waste, algae, and biomass. How it contributes to the regional security. Given as well that when we're talking about where the actual product's coming from the soil as well, and everything that's in the soil, there's a lot to discuss there, Bernie.
Yeah, look, there is, and it's a big topic, and I'm glad you've put it on the table because I think it's probably one that doesn't immediately come to mind. We tend to sort of focus our own thinking on what's happening in our own backyard, but here this is the bigger backyard. This is about our region, whether it's the Pacific or Asia Pacific, and it did give me a chance to think a little bit about the role we play. So we're a net exporter of protein, meat to a lot of countries, vegetables, fruit, agricultural products. We've got a lot to offer the world, and a lot of it is based around that agricultural piece that we've got. So if we look at that and look at the security in our region, we're seeing the developments right now. I was just reading about Tuvalu and about the residents there gaining visas and entry to Australia based on climate change, based on their island is being swamped by tides. They're going underwater. And so that's just one example, but there are many other examples in the Pacific. So I think if we project a little bit forward and we look to the future and we just say, what's happening in our backyard where we can play a role and where we need to play a role. So definitely with Pacific Islands, we're going to see a territorial issue of where people live, food security, water security in terms of, water and water quality. So these are all things that if we look back then, what are we doing today and how can we play a role? I think we can play a role. We have done for a very long time, more than 100 years. But I think if we look to the future, how are we going to continue to provide that? Well, then we've got to get back to some basics. What's happening in our own agricultural communities? And as I've talked before in a previous discussion we had around bioenergy and the circular economy, there's a really important piece to all of this. So right now, farmers are spending way too much money, too much cost on buying chemical-based fertilizers to keep nitrogen in the soil and to keep their crops going. And there's a point at which it's not only uneconomic, but it destroys the soil. You end up with this flaky, dusty soil, which is just can't produce any longer, and that's really bad for farmers. Instead, if we can produce, and we can through anaerobic digestion and a biogas process, some organic fertilizer that can be reapplied, and we can grow fallow crops, energy crops that are actually retain nitrogen in the soil. So I think there actually is a really good connection. At first, it may not seem to be, but I think there is, and not just on the agricultural piece, but we can extend that out to the development of biofuels and biodiesel, and just play a bigger role. I think there is an opportunity there for us going forward.
And then, Bernie, so that's, I guess, on a national basis. When we sort of spread the lens a little bit further into the, I guess, Australasia and the Indo-Pacific, what about developing nations such as, you mentioned, Tuvalu's not on the table anymore, obviously, but Fiji, who again, they're large part of their economy is around fuel storage and distribution. But what about other countries in the region who do have an agricultural industry? How easy is it for countries like that to be able to develop biofuel industries and have a sustainable sovereign capability of their own?
Yeah. Well, I think the easy answer is it's not easy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, again, look, good question in terms of trying to get our minds to focus on this, but a lot of the Pacific Islands, the energy generation actually comes from just diesel.
Mm.
It's expensive, really, really expensive. It's polluting. It's not a really great way to do it. And it's unsustainable for a start. But it's not a great way to have an energy system, of generating electricity to try and run an economy. It's just, it has its hard limitations. These economies can be agricultural economies. Some of them are to some extent. A lot still are subsistence farming and maybe not scaled up yet. But I think if we got serious here in Australia about how do we make a contribution, how do we contribute to, the security in the Asia Pacific, well, obviously by providing energy independence or helping with energy independence, helping with food and water independence and sustainability are 2 or 3 really great starting places. And we've done a lot already in the past. Australia's a big contributor, as most people would know, not only in defence in the Asia Pacific, the relationships we have with our neighbours, which are really strong, and also the agricultural ties, people ties, the exchange of skills and so forth, which are really strong. But I think there is, and this conversation, I think, again, governments do need to play a role here. This is not something that can be done from a PTY Ltd or a company in Brisbane, for example. This is something that's on the national table in terms of saying, how do we drive some of this? I think the opportunity, I know in the past there's been a lot of interest from certain Pacific islands around, biogas, because they do have a lot of biomass. They're usually quite green. They've got an opportunity there. It's never really been developed, mostly I think because, costs, skills, technology, getting it all there, doing it. It's hard enough in Australia, let alone trying to do it in a Pacific island country. But that shouldn't be the barrier. That shouldn't be what holds it back. The alternative is, if we were to really say, well, okay, well, that's just a bit too hard. Well, what's the alternative? Just burn more diesel.
Yeah.
It just seems completely foolish that could be what we're going to do for the next 20 years.
Yeah, and that's highly probable. The fact being, over the last 25 years, with our business having travelled around the Indo-Pacific into countries like Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vietnam, so on and so forth. The first thing you smell, Timor, is diesel in the air, or there's rubbish burning, or there's and the challenge you see as well with the beautiful people and people striving to build better businesses, better communities, better nations. Half those countries, though, PNG as an example, the PNG power company over there is known as PNG Powerless because 50% of the time they're in blackout. Because they just don't have they can't keep up with the energy load with the current way that they're doing things.
Massively limiting. Yeah, that was my point. It's not reliable, but it's also massively constraining to your economy.
Yeah.
If you're trying to move forward, if you're trying to build business, their issues are no different to our issues. Where economies grow is where you can get good, reliable, hopefully cheap, but energy so that you can build things. And one of the biggest problems I know exists in Australia is, Queensland is a good example. We've got one of the largest energy networks in the world, single network, the largest single network in the world. But if you're at the end of that network and you're trying to expand your existing business, and you might be in agricultural manufacturing, and you apply for more energy, you say, we need to use more. I say, well, there isn't any more. This is it. You're tapped out. You're not getting any more energy. So you're left with this, conundrum of we can't grow. A new business can't come to town. They can't connect.
Yeah.
So look, the solutions, which are sort of temporary in some way, solar panels, good for during the day, or very expensive batteries, which have limitations as well. So you start to get this circular problem, which is, we're cannibalizing ourselves in a lot of ways. I think we just need to take that bit of a leap. The same principles that we're wanting to apply here in Australia, we need to apply with our neighbours and do it in cooperation with them. And I know they'd be very excited about that opportunity for, leapfrogging over certain things, because for them, coal's not possible. No one's building a coal-fired power plant on a Pacific island. That's just not going to be the case. Hydro is not possible. Nuclear is not possible. We look at, wind perhaps to some extent. But again, you just start getting these problems of how do we solve and how do we play all of that security, be it energy security, food security, water security, geographical security. How do we play that back into our region for, geopolitical security? I think is the real question, and the opportunity. I think this is an opportunity. We close relationship, our Pacific Island friends. So I think we should be doing more in this space.
100%, because obviously, if you have a population that's disaffected or not engaged, they look to leave. They look to for opportunities elsewhere. And of course, Australia is the great southern land for a number of reasons, and we're very, very lucky. We've won the lottery of life for those of us who have been born here, or live here, or have migrated here as well. PNG is a good example. I guess for me to talk about, because we do a lot of business up there and have done for the last 25 years. People are wanting to build businesses up there. They're wanting to build a secure economy because they're proud of their country, all the challenges they have. And then you throw on top of that the geographical and supply chain challenges of New Guinea, the tribal challenges as well. There's a lot of challenges in these regions. And so when we talk about the Indo-Pacific, which is broad, it's over 40 countries, and how do we tie together? We've spoken about some of the challenges, but what about some of the opportunities with scaling up? We mentioned in our last conversation that we're a net exporter of product, and we export gas to Japan through the INPEX program. Can we potentially build an export industry for biogas to our neighbours in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, well, I think the answer to that question is just yes. I think we need to build it here first, and nascent market, infancy in terms of developing it. We've got more and more people through universities, through training programs. There are investors that are really interested. There are large corporations, very large corporations, that have got a really high exposure to carbon emissions, and they need offsets, and they're looking for solutions. And there's a limit, again, as to how much you can just buy an offset without actually having a real offset. And so that debate is now happening, where the method up to date's been, well, we'll just buy an offset somewhere and not worry about our own emissions. And now, of course, that eventually has to turn where you actually have to have a positive offset, i.e. you have to do something directly yourself, not just rely on someone else and pay them. And so there's a lot more to be developed here in Australia. But I think at the same time that we're doing that, for those that are directly involved in that space, so whether it's yourself, people like you, and government agencies, is to look at, well, how can we transfer that? Because there are clear links between, I think, the development of this nascent market in Australia and what we could do in the Pacific and Indo-Pacific. Whether it's Papua New Guinea, whether it's Fiji, whether it's helping our neighbours and creating an industry for us and helping them to move along that industry, give them energy security and better food security.
Yeah.
Go a long way.
I guess it also poses the questions, to our neighbours to the north, in the context of a geopolitical shifts. China are very aggressive and have been for a number of years with relation to their Central Kingdom policy, which everything comes back to the Central Kingdom, but that expansionism now, it's all about expansionism for them to feed 1.2 billion people. If you get 1.2 billion hungry people, there's uprising. So they need food, they need water, they need energy. So in the context of that, how can bioenergy initiatives help foster regional cooperation and potentially create stability in the Indo-Pacific? Yeah,
well, certainly us looking deeper to make a contribution in this space, I think, is really important. There are no question that China faces some really difficult issues moving forward. They've got a lot of people, and in the past 2 decades, and maybe a bit longer, they've moved probably 300-400 million people out of abject poverty into something less than that. Maybe poverty in our eyes, but certainly almost middle class for them. But their challenges on energy are really clear. Their challenges on running an economy and keeping people employed and keeping people fed, and all of those things that come with that, including their environment. I mean, we all understand how polluted the Chinese and China, the environment is, because it's been this runaway industrial machine which has accelerated anything that the West ever did. And they're paying the price personally and locally for that as well. And we also know about their investment in the Pacific. They've not been shy to put lots of money on the table to build, edifices to themselves and to build shiny buildings and things that look great, don't particularly contribute anything to an economy, but because they come along with their own money, their own people, they build big shiny tower or something, and then stay or leave or something. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it's not a productive piece of infrastructure in that sense unless you're doing something with it. So the opportunity for us is definitely there in a lot of ways. And I did a lot of work and travel through the Pacific in my time in government. And in a lot of ways, the thing that really stuck out for me was that the Pacific Islands see us as big brother, not always in a good way. But they acknowledge that we are big brother and that we've got a lot more to do to contribute to their economic prosperity and to the way that they can help develop their own economies. They're fiercely independent. They're very proud of their own cultures and their own being. But I think if we do it well, then we can do better in this space, and it can contribute. The point of all of that is that then that can contribute to some better stability in the region.
Probably a step further than investing $600 million into a rugby league team in Papua New Guinea, but more of effect. But hey, Bernie, I really appreciate your time today, mate. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but I'd love to catch up with you again.
Let's do it again.
It's very, very important to not only to Australia, but to the Indo-Pacific as well. And I'm really admiring what you and Utilitas are doing, mate.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Todd. Appreciate you.
Good on you, Bernie. See ya.